If you've been on the spiritual path for a while, you probably know more about manifestation, consciousness, and quantum physics than 99% of the population. You can explain vibration, energy, timelines, and identity shifts with impressive clarity. You've read the books, taken the courses, watched the videos, and had profound realizations that felt like they would change everything. Yet when you look at your actual life, it looks frustratingly similar to what it was before you started this journey. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Quantum reality doesn't shift from knowing. It shifts when you start living the knowing. The quantum field is like a sophisticated energy detector that can't be fooled by what you understand intellectually. It doesn't respond to your spiritual vocabulary, your profound insights, or your theoretical grasp of how reality works. It responds to who you're being in each moment, to your actual energetic signature, to the frequency you're broadcasting through your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. You could have a PhD in consciousness studies and still struggle to manifest a parking space if your being isn't aligned with your knowing. This is why so many intelligent, spiritually aware people remain stuck despite their vast understanding. They've fallen into the trap of spiritual consumption without energetic application. They know about embodiment of truth, but they're not actually embodying it. They understand living your higher self conceptually, but they're still operating from their old programming most of the time. They've studied quantum shift practices, but they're not practicing them consistently enough to create real transformation. In the next few minutes, you're going to discover why knowing isn't enough, how the quantum field actually responds to embodiment rather than information, and most importantly, how to bridge the gap between your highest understanding and your daily reality. This isn't about learning something new, it's about becoming everything you already know to be true. There's a special kind of spiritual frustration that comes from knowing exactly what you need to do, but somehow never doing it consistently enough to create real change. You've read all the books, watched countless videos, taken the courses, and can eloquently explain concepts like manifestation, quantum physics, and consciousness to anyone who'll listen. You know about vibration, energy, timelines, and identity. You've got the vocabulary down perfectly. Yet when you look at your actual life, it looks remarkably similar to what it was before you started this journey. The same relationship patterns, the same financial struggles, the same emotional reactions, the same sense of being stuck. It's maddening because you feel like you should be further along by now, like all this knowledge should have translated into transformation by now. This frustration is actually a sacred initiation. It's your soul telling you that intellectual understanding is just the first step, not the destination. Most people get stuck in what I call spiritual study mode, where they become addicted to learning new concepts and techniques without ever fully embodying the ones they already know. They collect insights like trophies, attend workshops like entertainment, and discuss consciousness like it's an academic subject rather than a lived experience. There's something seductive about the learning phase because it feels like progress without requiring the vulnerability of actual change. You can know about surrender without surrendering, understand love without loving fully, comprehend abundance without living abundantly. The gap between knowing and being is where most spiritual seekers spend years of their lives, and it's the most uncomfortable place to be because you can see the promised land, but you haven't figured out how to actually live there. You know what you should think, what you should feel, how you should respond to life, but when challenges arise, you find yourself reacting from the same old patterns. You know you're a divine being having a human experience, but you still feel small and limited most of the time. This isn't a failure of understanding. It's an invitation to move beyond understanding into embodiment of truth. The knowing was never meant to stay in your head. It was meant to become your lived reality through consistent, courageous practice. The quantum field is like a sophisticated lie detector that can't be fooled by what you know or what you say. It only responds to what you authentically are in each moment. You could have a PhD in quantum physics and still struggle to manifest a parking space if your being isn't aligned with your knowing. You could memorize every spiritual text ever written and still attract the same limiting experiences if your energetic signature hasn't shifted at the core level. This is because the field doesn't read your thoughts, your intentions, or your intellectual understanding. It reads your frequency, and your frequency is determined by who you're being, not what you're knowing. Your being is composed of your most repeated thoughts, most familiar emotions, most practiced behaviors, and deepest beliefs about yourself and reality. These elements create what scientists call a coherent electromagnetic field that broadcasts into the quantum matrix and attracts experiences that match its signature. When you truly understand this, it becomes clear why positive thinking alone doesn't work, why affirmations often fail, and why people can study spiritual concepts for decades without experiencing transformation. They're trying to change their reality through information while their being remains unchanged, which is like trying to change a radio station by talking to the radio instead of turning the dial. The revolutionary shift happens when you realize that embodiment of truth is not just helpful for transformation, it's the only thing that creates transformation. The quantum field doesn't care what you learned in that workshop last weekend or what insight you had during meditation this morning. It cares who you're being right now in this moment as you move through your day. Are you being someone who trusts the universe or someone who worries about the future? Are you being someone who knows their worth or someone who seeks validation? Are you being someone who naturally attracts abundance or someone who struggles with scarcity? These states of being are what the field responds to with mathematical precision. Modern spirituality has become a consumption-based industry where people collect insights like souvenirs without ever fully unpacking them and making them their home. There's always another technique to learn, another guru to follow, another method to try, another level to achieve. This constant seeking becomes a sophisticated form of resistance to actually embodying what you already know, because as long as you're still learning, you never have to fully commit to living what you've learned. It's like having a closet full of beautiful clothes, but always wearing the same old outfit because it's comfortable and familiar. The trap is subtle because it feels like spiritual growth. You're attending workshops, reading books, listening to podcasts, having profound realizations. Surely this is progress. But there's a difference between spiritual consumption and spiritual transformation. Consumption is passive, transformation is active. Consumption happens in your mind. Transformation happens in your entire being. Consumption is about gathering information. Transformation is about living your higher self so completely that your external reality has no choice but to reorganize itself around your new frequency. The moment you start preferring the comfort of learning over the challenge of embodying, you've fallen into the consumption trap. This pattern is particularly seductive for intelligent, spiritually minded people because it satisfies their need to feel like they're doing something while avoiding the vulnerability and uncertainty that comes with real change. Analysis becomes a hiding place, understanding becomes an escape, and seeking becomes a way to avoid finding. But here's what most people don't realize. The quantum field doesn't reward spiritual knowledge. It rewards spiritual embodiment. You could have the most sophisticated understanding of consciousness on the planet, but if you're not living your higher self consistently, your reality will remain unchanged. The path forward isn't learning more, it's becoming more of what you already know to be true. The alchemy of transformation happens when you stop learning about your truth and start living as your truth. This means taking every insight you've gained, every concept you've studied, every realization you've had, and asking yourself, how would someone who fully embodies this truth show up in the world? Then you practice being that person until it stops feeling like practice and starts feeling like your natural way of being. This isn't about pretending or performing. It's about consciously choosing to operate from your highest understanding rather than your oldest patterns. Living the knowing requires what I call identity integration, where your spiritual insights become so embodied that they influence every aspect of your expression. If you know you're a divine being, how does that divinity move through your body? How does it speak to others? How does it handle challenges? How does it make decisions? If you know you're abundant, how does that abundance breathe? How does it think about money? How does it respond to perceived lack? These aren't philosophical questions. They're practical applications of your spiritual understanding that determine whether that understanding remains intellectual decoration or becomes lived reality. The inner alchemy happens through repetition and commitment. Every time you choose to respond to life from your highest knowing rather than your lowest programming, you're literally rewiring your nervous system and updating your energetic signature. Every time you embody your truth instead of just thinking about it, you're installing new software in your consciousness. This is quantum shift practices in action, where you become so committed to living your higher self that your old identity starts to feel foreign and uncomfortable. The goal isn't to become someone new, it's to become who you actually are beneath all the conditioning and limitations you've been practicing for years. The most powerful practice for embodiment of truth is what I call identity breathing, conscious breathwork, where you literally breathe your knowing into your being. Spend 10-15 minutes each morning breathing slowly and deeply, while asking yourself, who am I when I fully embody my highest understanding? Then breathe that identity into every cell of your body. Feel your divinity in your breath, your abundance in your heartbeat, your power in your posture. This isn't visualization, this is energetic embodiment, where you're teaching your nervous system what it feels like to live from your truth rather than your trauma. Movement is equally crucial, because your body holds the energetic patterns of your old identity in your posture, gesture, and way of moving through space. Start walking as your higher self walks. Stand as someone who knows their worth stands. Gesture as someone who trusts the universe gestures. These physical changes might seem superficial, but they're actually reprogramming your identity at the cellular level. Your body and mind are in constant communication, and when you change how you embody your identity physically, you're sending new information throughout your entire system about who you're becoming. Emotional frequency tuning is perhaps the most important quantum shift practices because emotions are pure energy that directly communicate with the quantum field. Instead of waiting for good things to happen so you can feel grateful, practice feeling grateful first and let that gratitude magnetize good things. Instead of hoping to find love so you can feel lovable, cultivate the feeling of being deeply loved right now and let that frequency attract love. This isn't fake it till you make it positive thinking. This is conscious frequency selection, where you choose the emotions that align with your highest truth, regardless of your external circumstances. When you master this, you're literally living your higher self at the energetic level. The biggest obstacle to embodiment of truth isn't lack of knowledge, it's fear of fully committing to who you know yourself to be. There's something terrifying about letting go of the familiar limitations that have defined you for years and stepping into the fullness of your potential. Your ego will create elaborate stories about why you can't fully embody your truth. You're not ready, you don't deserve it, people won't recognize you, you'll lose relationships, you'll fail spectacularly. These fears are actually signs that you're approaching genuine transformation because your old identity knows its survival is threatened by your commitment to living your higher self. The fear often manifests as imposter syndrome. Who are you to live as this empowered, abundant, loving version of yourself? What will people think? What if you can't maintain it? What if you discover you're not actually capable of being that magnificent? But here's the truth that dissolves these fears. You're not becoming someone you're not. You're becoming who you actually are beneath all the conditioning. Your higher self isn't a fantasy or a goal. It's your authentic nature that's been covered over by years of programming. The fear isn't about becoming fake. It's about becoming real for the first time. The way through this fear is gradual, consistent practice rather than dramatic overnight transformation. You don't have to embody your full truth perfectly from day one. You just have to choose it more often than you choose your limitations. Every time you act from love instead of fear, speak your truth instead of people-pleasing, trust instead of controlling, you're building evidence for your nervous system that this new identity is safe and sustainable. Quantum shift practices work best when they're implemented gradually and consistently, allowing your system to adjust to your new frequency without overwhelming your capacity for change. When you're truly living your higher self, the first thing you'll notice is that your internal experience becomes more consistent, regardless of external circumstances. You don't need perfect conditions to feel peaceful, abundant situations to feel grateful, or smooth relationships to feel loving. These elevated states start becoming your baseline because you're generating them from within, rather than depending on external validation. Your emotional life becomes more stable, your mental chatter becomes quieter, and your overall sense of well-being improves dramatically because you're finally living in alignment with your truth rather than fighting against it. Synchronicities become a regular part of your experience because your embodiment of truth creates coherence in your energy field, and this coherence attracts people, opportunities, and circumstances that match your new frequency. You'll start noticing meaningful coincidences, perfect timing, and resources appearing exactly when you need them. These aren't random events, they're feedback from the quantum field that your internal alignment is creating external organization. The more consistently you embody your truth, the more fluid and graceful your life becomes, because you're no longer swimming against the current of your authentic nature. Perhaps the most profound sign is that you stop needing external confirmation that you're on the right path, because the rightness becomes self-evident through your lived experience. You don't question whether you're worthy, because worthiness becomes your felt sense. You don't worry about abundance because you feel abundant regardless of your bank balance. You don't seek love because you know yourself as love. This isn't arrogance or spiritual bypassing. It's the natural result of quantum shift practices that have successfully bridged the gap between knowing and being. Your truth is no longer something you think about. It's something you live as naturally as breathing. Every insight you've ever had, every truth you've ever glimpsed, every moment of clarity you've ever experienced, none of it was meant to remain as mental decoration. It was all meant to become your lived reality through the courage of consistent embodiment. Your understanding of your divine nature was meant to transform how you walk through the world. Your knowledge of abundance was meant to change your relationship with money, resources, and receiving. Your insights about love were meant to revolutionize how you connect with yourself and others. The gap between your highest knowing and your daily reality is the invitation of your lifetime. The universe isn't interested in how much you know about consciousness. It's interested in how much consciousness you're willing to embody. Every spiritual concept you've learned, every technique you've studied, every truth you've recognized is asking you the same question. Will you live me, or will you just think about me? This is the ultimate spiritual practice, taking everything you know to be true and making it your moment-to-moment reality. Not because you have to, not because you should, but because this is how truth expresses itself through human experience. Your embodiment of truth isn't just personal transformation. It's how you contribute to the evolution of consciousness on this planet. Every time you choose to live from your highest knowing rather than your oldest wounds, you're upgrading the collective field. Every time you embody love instead of fear, abundance instead of scarcity, trust instead of control, you're demonstrating what's possible for humanity. Living your higher self is your service to the world because it gives others permission to do the same. Your life becomes a living example of what happens when someone commits fully to their truth, and this example has the power to awaken others to their own possibilities. The world doesn't need another person who knows about enlightenment. It needs someone who lives as enlightenment. So here's what I need you to understand. Every moment you spend collecting new insights without embodying the ones you already have is a moment of spiritual procrastination. Every workshop you attend, every book you read, every video you watch, without fully living what you learned from the last one, is keeping you in the comfort zone of knowing rather than the transformation zone of being. Are you ready to stop being a spiritual consumer and start being a consciousness embodier? Are you willing to take everything you know to be true and make it your lived reality, even when it feels vulnerable, uncertain, or unfamiliar? Because here's what I know. The world doesn't need another person who can talk about enlightenment. It needs someone who lives as enlightenment. I want you to commit to this for the next 7 days. Choose one spiritual truth you know intellectually and embody it completely. If you know you're divine, breathe divinity into every cell. If you know you're abundant, let abundance inform every decision. If you know you're love, let love be your default response to everything. Stop learning and start living what you already know. What's the deepest truth you know that you're ready to finally embody completely? Share it in the comments, because naming your commitment is the first step to living it, and I want to support your transformation from knowing to being. And if you're serious about mastering embodiment of truth and living your higher self consistently, make sure you watch the video appearing on your screen where I reveal the 3 most powerful quantum shift practices for bridging the gap between understanding and embodiment. Remember, your truth was never meant to stay in your mind. It was meant to recreate your world. Subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, and join me every week as we explore how to live as the consciousness we know ourselves to be. Your knowing is complete. Now it's time to let it live through you.